Hello everyone, and welcome to the first video in my Learning Python video series. So in this series, I'm going to be using the Python programming language in order to teach basic programming. Now in this first video, we're going to address two topics: how we run a Python script and also some of the fundamental basics of Python output. And to do this, we're of course going to write the classic Hello World program. So let's get right into it. So we're going to need two things in order to get started here. The first is we need to have Python installed on your path. I'm not going to address what exactly that means or how you do it here, as this is a programming video, but you can find plenty of information about this elsewhere. The basic idea is that you should be able to open up a terminal, type Python, and have Python launch. If that does not happen, you're not going to be able to follow along with this video, so you'll have to fix that and come back. The other thing that you are going to need is a basic text editor. So something like Notepad, Nano, Vim, etc. You can't use a word processor for this, so that's no Microsoft Office Word, no LibreOffice Writer, things of that nature. It has to be a plain text editor. Now for this video series, I'm going to be using Vim, which is my personal favorite editor. I would recommend you not use Vim unless you already know it. It has a bit of a learning curve. But basically all text editors for this purpose are interchangeable, plus or minus a couple of nice to have but not strictly necessary features from one editor to another. And now as a final note, I'm going to be recording these videos here on my Linux desktop. So most of what you see here in terms of stuff I type should work just fine on Mac or in PowerShell on Windows with perhaps some minor tweaks. If you're using command prompt, you're going to have to translate all of the commands as well. And again, that's going to be out of scope of this video series, so I'm not going to address it again. The focus here is going to be programming, not how you use your computer. Okay, so programming. Now, when we're writing a Python program, we're effectively just writing a series of instructions that the computer can understand and perform in order to solve a problem of some sort. So realistically, you can actually break programming out into two separate phases. The first phase is we have to solve the problem. Stands to reason. We have to solve the problem somehow and derive some procedure for how we're going to do that. And then the second step is the actual programming bit, is we have to take that solution that we've arrived at and translate it into our programming language, in this case Python. Now everyone thinks a little bit differently, and so depending upon how you personally think, one of those two steps will likely be more difficult than the other. In my experience, usually the first one is what people find to be the most difficult, the actual deriving a solution to a problem. But for some people, that comes easily, but they have trouble actually writing it. Especially if you're not particularly detail-oriented, writing programs can be tricky because every little character matters. So either way, one of those two things, or both, you will probably find difficult. This video perhaps won't illustrate it well because of how simple our program is going to be, but this will be very difficult, a very difficult learning process for the majority of people. So for this first video, I'm going to illustrate this process by writing an incredibly simple program, and it's going to be the bog standard Hello World program. The idea is we're going to write a program which will just display some static text when you run it. And by static, what I mean is that this text will be the same every single time we run the program. Now after that, in the next video, we're going to tweak this program so that it accepts input and the output becomes dynamic. The text we see changes depending upon what we put into it. For now, we are just going to output static text. So when we're done, what we want to have happen is this. We want to run our program. This is how you run a Python program, is you type the word Python, and then you type the file name and location of the program that you would like to run. Notice that our Python programs end with a .py extension. This is not strictly necessary, but it does let us know that we are working with a Python file. And so if we do that, Python, the name of the program to run, we should see for our final program the output hello world. appear on the terminal. So this is where we're going. Now, how do we get there? Well, first we have to arrive at the procedure. And in this case, the procedure is fairly straightforward. So we realistically have 3 steps. We need to begin the program, we need to display this text, and then we need to end the program. So that's our solution procedure. In this really simple example, it's not hard to come up with, so I'm not going to linger further. Now we can focus on the second step, which is we need to take this 3-step process, translate it into Python code. Now, in some programming languages, we're going to have to write special indicators to mark the start and the end of a program. It can take a variety of different forms depending upon the language, as straightforward as in Fortran, where you have begin program, end program, or sometimes it's a little bit more abstract, but in many cases you do have to indicate those 2 steps. Python is not one of those languages, and so when we're writing Python code to solve a problem, this one or others, we're simply going to address the middle bits. Step 1, and in this case step 3, the start program, end program, aren't really going to play a role in anything that we write. They're going to be implicit, implied. So in all future examples, I'm probably just going to leave those off. So we can now focus on just step 2, displaying the message. All right, so in order to write a Python program, we first need to create an empty text file. I'm going to call it hello.py. And you can do that by typing your text editor name, space, the name of the file you want to create, if you're assuming your text editor is set up properly. Okay, so I'm going to add the basic steps of our procedure into here. Just type them in, and I will begin each line with a pound sign. So first we need to start. Then we need to display the message. Then we need to end the program. Now, you'll notice that the text that I've typed here is in a different color. If I just type standard text, you can see it comes out looking like that in white. This text is in blue. This is a feature of a number of text editors called syntax highlighting. We'll get more into what it is and how it works at a later point. It basically is just an indication to you visually as to what that line is or what those characters are in the context of, in this case, a Python program. It is strictly aesthetic. It's not going to affect any of the data inside of the file itself. Now, in particular, these lines that I've typed here beginning with a pound sign are something called comments. So these are lines that have no functional meaning to Python. They don't mean anything to the computer, and so they're ignored. These lines don't actually add any functionality to the program that we're writing. They don't do anything. All they serve to do is to allow us to add text. And this is useful because we can use it to describe what it is that we're doing. So here I've used comments to indicate our 3 steps. We'll talk more about what sorts of comments you should include in your programs later. And yes, you should always include comments in your programs, although oftentimes we ignore that, much to our detriment further down the line. Okay, so now we've already decided we're not really going to pay too much attention to these 2 because they're implicit in Python. So we have to think about this. How are we actually going to display our message? Well, as luck would have it, displaying messages on the terminal is something that is done fairly frequently when you're programming. And so if we were to have to write the code to actually interact with Linux to do that directly, every single time we wanted to do it, it would get to be a bit of a hassle. So we are going to use something called a function. Now a function, and we're going to talk at length about functions later, but a function in short is a name that is given to some code that was written elsewhere. So you could have written it, in this case, somebody else wrote it, and we can execute that code by referencing the name. So someone has written the code necessary to display text. All we have to do is reference it by name, and it will display the text for us. So we're going to use a built-in Python function for displaying our text that is called print. So all we have to do in order to call a function or to execute the code inside of the function is we type the name of the function. Our function is called print, so we type the word print. Now we have to do a little bit more than that. We're also going to have to add some parentheses here. Now these parentheses are very important. In Python specifically, parentheses can mean one of three different things, depending upon the context. In this context, the parentheses indicate that we are calling the function. So the name print here refers to the function, the code that's going to run to actually display text. The parentheses are telling Python that we would like to execute that code. So without the parentheses, the code won't actually execute. Now, additionally, you may be looking at this and wondering, well, where does that hello world text come in, right? We're going to have to specify what it is that we want to have Python say. And the parentheses are also used for this. So we can write the input to our function inside of these parentheses. Our print function will accept as input the thing that we want printed. Seems fairly straightforward. So let's add that now. Now notice hello world, this is the text that we would like to display. And notice that I have put it in quotation marks. You can use single quotes like this, or you can use double quotes. Either one will work. You cannot mix them. In any event, the quotes, we'll talk more about this later, but the quotes are indicating that hello world here is text. It's text data, which is important because otherwise Python will interpret this line very differently. Really very differently if we don't include that. All right, and so to be honest with you, this is it. One of the reasons people like Python so much is that the hello world program is so incredibly simple. So now we should be in a position where we can run this thing. Now the first thing we have to do before we can run it is we have to actually save the file, and this is very important. So I'm going to just do that now. If you don't save the file, then when you go to actually run the program, it's not going to run the program you think that it's running, which can lead to some annoyance. So make sure that you save your code before you try and run it. Frankly, you should save your code very often in case of a computer crash or something, but I won't beat that particular dead horse. At least save it before you go to run it. Okay. So now that we've saved it, we should see the hello.py file, and we can execute it. So type the word Python space hello.py, enter. And lo and behold, we see the hello world text displayed on the screen. This is the program that we are running. This is what happens when we run it. So cool. If all is well, that's what you'll see. Now instead, you might see something that looks like this. Or you might see something that looks like this, maybe even that. So these are examples of errors. And these mean that you've typed something in your program incorrectly. So the text here is going to describe exactly what went wrong. At the moment, they're going to look a little confusing and probably hard to understand. There'll be a lot of words here, syntax, name, string literal, things like that that you might not understand yet. Don't worry. Eventually you will. We'll get to all these things in their own place. But by and large, these do provide a lot of useful feedback once you understand the vocabulary. So as backwards as it may sound right now, these error messages will actually become your best friends as you move into writing more complicated programs. Python's errors are relatively friendly so far as programming languages go. All right, so if you saw any of these or something that looks like this, it may have, the exact details of the error may have been a little bit different, then what that means is that you typed something incorrectly. So come back over here and make sure that your program looks exactly like that. Every single detail matters. That's one of the things that's so difficult about writing code. Every little detail matters. So make sure it is this exactly. Don't exercise any creativity. Copy this exactly. and then continue to tweak it until it actually runs and you see the words "Hello World." And once it does, congratulations. You've just written and executed your first Python program. So it'll probably feel rather trivial right now, but even writing and executing this very simple program is more than the majority of people will be able to say that they've done. So you've now taken your first steps down the long and difficult road of learning how to program. In the next video, we're going to discuss taking this program here and making it a tad more dynamic by allowing us to send input into the program and change the text that we see. So thank you for watching. I hope that you found this useful, and I will see you in that video.